You know what's incredible about human nature? We spend so much time fighting against the very things meant to help us grow. And there's no better example of this than the story of Jacob literally wrestling with God all night long.
That's such a fascinating way to look at it. Here's someone who spent his entire life manipulating situations to get what he wanted, and it all comes down to this physical confrontation with the divine.
Well, let's paint the full picture here. Jacob had been on the run for 20 years after deceiving his father and stealing his brother's blessing. Now he gets word that the same brother is approaching with 400 men.
Hmm. And his immediate response is so telling. He divides everything into two groups, thinking if one gets attacked, at least the other might survive. Still trying to control everything through clever planning.
You know what's really interesting, though? This is where we see Jacob's first recorded prayer in Scripture, and it's remarkably honest. He basically admits he's terrified while reminding God of his own promises.
That combination of fear and faith really humanizes him, doesn't it? Here's this successful man who's built up considerable wealth, yet he's absolutely terrified of facing his past.
And then comes this incredible night scene. Jacob sends everyone else across the Jabbok River, his wives, children, all his possessions. He's completely alone when this mysterious figure appears and starts wrestling with him.
Well, that's what fascinates me about this story. The text is deliberately vague about who exactly Jacob is wrestling with. Sometimes it's described as a man, but by the end, Jacob claims he's seen God face to face.
Right. And this wrestling match goes on all night long. Can you imagine the physical and emotional exhaustion? Yet, even when this figure dislocates Jacob's hip with just a touch, showing supernatural power, Jacob refuses to let go until he receives a blessing.
That's such a powerful metaphor for spiritual transformation, isn't it? Sometimes we have to hit that point of complete exhaustion before we're ready to receive what God has for us.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Jacob receives a new name, Israel, meaning he struggles with God. But what's fascinating is that the text continues to call him Jacob more often than Israel afterwards, suggesting that transformation is an ongoing process.
You know, that reminds me of modern psychological research about behavior change. It's rarely a one-time event, but rather a series of small shifts over time.
Exactly. And then comes this beautiful resolution the next day. After all this fear and preparation, Esau runs to meet Jacob, embraces him, and they both weep. It's this incredible picture of reconciliation that seemed impossible just hours before.
The contrast between what Jacob feared and what actually happened is remarkable. He expected violence and instead received forgiveness and love.
Well, think about this. Jacob tells Esau that seeing his face is like seeing the face of God. This connects directly to the previous night at Peniel, which literally means face of God. He's seeing divine grace reflected in his brother's forgiveness.
So, what do you think this story tells us about the nature of personal transformation?
You know, I think it shows us that real change often requires a kind of wrestling with ourselves, with God, with our past. And sometimes we walk away with a limp, but we also walk away transformed.
That's really profound. The idea that our struggles, while painful, can lead to blessing.
And let's not forget the historical significance. This story becomes foundational for an entire nation. Israel's very name comes from this wrestling match, suggesting that struggling with God is somehow part of their national identity.
Well, that's what makes this story so timeless, right? Whether it's personal transformation or societal change, real growth often comes through struggle.
Exactly. And perhaps that's the most hopeful part of this story, that our wrestling matches with God, while difficult, can lead to profound blessing. Even when we walk away with a limp, we also walk away changed.